She expected chaos, desperate phone calls, maybe even angry outbursts, begging for another chance. That's how it had always been with others. Men who couldn't let go, who sacrificed their pride just to keep her attention. But you were different. You didn't scream. You didn't bargain. You didn't even say goodbye. You just disappeared. And that silence was louder than anything she'd ever heard. At first, she told herself it didn't matter. She was used to being chased, used to being the one who held the power. But as days passed with no word from you, something shifted. The absence became palpable. She'd check her phone out of habit, waiting for a notification that never came. She'd replay your last conversation, searching for clues, wondering if she'd missed something. But there was nothing to find, just the quiet. That's when it hit her. You weren't coming back, not this time. And the realization was unsettling, because for once, she wasn't dealing with a man who needed her to feel whole. Away, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. You didn't need her validation to know your worth. And that was something she'd never encountered before. The panic set in slowly, creeping up like a shadow. She'd catch herself thinking of you at random moments, laughing at something only you would understand. Or hearing a song that reminded her of the way you used to look at her. The silence you left behind wasn't empty. It was filled with all the things she'd taken for granted. The way you listened, really listened, when she spoke. The way you knew her moods before she did. The way you made her feel safe in a world that never stopped moving. Now that safety was gone. And the worst part, she had no one to blame but herself. You didn't leave her with drama or bitterness, just the echo of what she'd lost. And in that silence, she finally heard the truth. She'd underestimated you. She thought you'd always be there, waiting. But you weren't in the weight of that. Realization was heavier than any goodbye could ever be. She told herself it was just a matter of time before you cracked. After all, you always had before. Every argument, every cold shoulder, every time. She pulled away, you were the one who bridged the distance. You apologized, even when it wasn't your fault. You showed up even when she gave you every reason not to. So when she pushed too far this time, when she crossed a line even you couldn't ignore, she wasn't worried. She figured you'd come crawling back like all the others. That's how it worked, didn't it? The first week was easy. She barely noticed your absence, too wrapped up in the drama of her own life. She went out with friends, posted carefree. Selfies laughed a little too loud, all the usual performances of someone trying to prove they're fine. But by the second week, the script started to feel hollow. The nights got longer. The distractions wore thinner. She'd catch herself, reaching for her phone to text you before remembering you weren't there to answer. By the third week, doubt crept in. She replayed your last conversation, dissecting every word for hidden meanings. Had you really meant it? Were you actually done? No, that couldn't be right. You loved her too much to walk away for good. This was just a test, a power play. You were waiting for her to make the first move, to give you an excuse to come back. So she held out, stubborn, refusing to break. Except you didn't either. A month passed. Then 2, the silence stretched heavy and unbroken. That's when the realization hit like a gut punch. You weren't playing games. You weren't secretly pining. You had simply moved on. The safety net she'd taken for granted was gone. No amount of pride could mask the sinking truth. She'd misjudged you entirely. You weren't like the others. You didn't need her to feel whole. And that knowledge settled in her chest like a stone, dragging her down into a quiet, aching regret she never saw coming. She kept waiting for the signs of your unraveling, the late-night drunk texts, the angry social media posts, the mutual friends whispering about how broken you seemed. That's what usually happened when men lost her. They fell apart publicly, their pain on display like a badge of honor. But you gave her nothing. No drama, no desperate bids for attention, just silence. At first she told herself, you were just hiding it better. Maybe you were drowning your sorrows alone or sulking in self-pity where no one could see. But then the rumors started trickling in, not about your misery, but about your growth. You were at the gym every morning. You'd picked up new projects at work. Your friends mentioned how focused you seemed, How light. That didn't make sense? How could you be okay when she wasn't entirely okay without you? She scrolled through your socials, searching for cracks in the facade. But there were no sad quotes, no vague posts about betrayal. Just glimpses of a life moving forward, hiking trails, coffee shops, a new book on your nightstand, normal things, happy things. The kind of mundane contentment that stung worse than any outburst could have. Because it meant you weren't just surviving without her, you were thriving. The realization settled like a cold weight in her stomach. She'd expected to be the ghost haunting you, but instead it was your absence that haunted her, not the absence of the man she'd left. The absence of the man you were becoming. Someone calmer, sharper, more sure of himself. Someone she no longer had access to. Worst of all, she couldn't even resent you for it. There was no villain here, no grand betrayal to point to, just the quiet, undeniable truth. She'd let go of someone who knew how to grow without her. Times she heard your name, or caught a glimpse of your smile in a friend's tagged photo. It wasn't nostalgia she felt, it was the eerie, unsettling understanding that you were slipping further away, not in anger, but in peace. And that kind of loss doesn't leave a wound. It leaves a question. Asterisk, was I the thing holding you back? She tried to replace you, of course she did. Nights out with friends, flirty texts with new guys, even a rebound who laughed at all the right moments. But none of them knew her like you did. None of them could read the tension in her shoulders. After a bad day, or sense the storm behind her silence. They took her sarcasm at face value, mistook her sharp edges for confidence instead of armor. And when she tried to explain, their eyes glazed over with polite confusion. That's when it hit her. You weren't just a lover. You were a sanctuary. The new guy bought her drinks. He used to bring her tea without asking when her voice got raspy from crying. The new guy complimented her makeup. He used to trace her bare face with your thumb and call her beautiful when she felt broken. The comparisons came unbidden, unwelcome, like ghosts rattling the windows of every new relationship. She hated herself for it, but the truth was inescapable. You'd loved her in a language no one else seemed to speak. Even the fights were different now. With you, arguments had resolution, heated words that cooled into apologies and deeper understanding. With others, conflict just evaporated. They'd shrugged and changed the subject. Too afraid or indifferent to dig for the root of things. It left her feeling lonelier than solitude ever had. Because you hadn't just tolerated her chaos, you'd known how to navigate it. You'd seen the wounded child behind her anger and loved her anyway. Now she catches herself reaching for her. Phone at 2 a.m., thumb hovering over your old texts before remembering. The new guy wouldn't answer at this hour, or if he did, he'd sigh and tell her to take a sleeping pill. But you used to stay awake until dawn when her mind wouldn't quiet. Your voice a steady anchor in the dark. She tells herself this is growth, that she's learning to stand alone. But some nights, when the world feels particularly hollow, she wonders if she didn't just lose a relationship, but the last person who'd ever truly see her. And the cruelest part? You're not even gone out of spite, you're just living. While she's left measuring every new love against a ghost, she told herself this would pass. That one morning she'd wake up and your memory would feel lighter, like a scar that no longer aches when it rains. But time doesn't work the way she hoped. Instead, you become something far more dangerous than a lesson. Standard, every man since has been measured against the way you listened, not just to her words, but to the silence between them, against. How you could disarm her defenses with a single look? Not because you demanded surrender, but because you made safety feel effortless. Even the good ones fall short, not for lack of trying, but because what you built wasn't just love, it was recognition. The kind that can't be replicated through effort or charm. She watches you from a distance now, not with longing, but with quiet, furious curiosity. How is it that you seem so at peace? How have you managed to turn absence into something that looks like grace? Meanwhile, she's trapped in the echoes, startling at a familiar laugh in a crowded room, catching her breath when someone wears your cologne. The world won't let her forget. Here's the truth she can't outrun. You didn't just leave. You left her with the unbearable gift of knowing what real love feels like. Not the dramatic, soul-consuming kind from movies, but the steady, unshakable kind that makes everything else feel like a counterfeit. And now she's condemned to spot the differences in how they hold her too tight or not tight enough, in how their promises feel like possibilities instead of certainties. The cruelest part, you're not even doing it on purpose. You're not lurking in her demise or staging accidental run-ins. You're just living well, and that's what makes it unforgettable, because she could have handled bitterness. She could have weathered anger. But your indifference, you're genuine. Unforced happiness without her, that's the one thing that refuses to fade. So she waits, though she'd never admit it, for the day this stops hurting. But some losses aren't meant to heal clean. Some leave. A phantom lament, itch where you used to be, a reflex to reach for someone who's no longer there. And when she's very still, when the distraction's finally quiet, she can almost hear it. The deafening silence of what happens when a good man stops waiting.